As a canine behavior consultant specializing in intra-household aggression, I often talk about dog-dog aggression when I talk intra-household work. But today I want to talk about intra-household cases that involve dogs and cats. Now, it's worth noting that I am not a cat behavior consultant. So as with any type of case, the first most important piece is to figure out the function of the behavior. The first most important piece is management. We want everyone to be physically and emotionally safe. But before we start doing any behavior modification, and sometimes in order to set up appropriate management, we need to understand why the behavior is happening. In cases involving dogs and cats, we're often trying to decide, is this problematic behavior, is the dangerous behavior based in predatory behavior? Is it based in fear? Is it based in over-arousal? Or is it highly contextual? So the first is predatory behavior. And this can exist on a spectrum. So it could be that a portion of the dog's predatory sequence is being triggered, or it could be that the entire predatory sequence is being triggered. It could be that a cat existing is the trigger. So if the dog is aware that the cat exists in the house, they can hear them or smell them, even if they can't see them, they are in predation mode. I saw a video the other day of a dog just sitting outside of the room that the cat was in, and this dog will do this for hours on end, all day, every day. Or it could be that the predatory behavior is only triggered by the cat making a certain noise or moving in a certain way. It may even be that some cats trigger the predatory behavior and others don't. And sometimes that can be outside cats versus inside cats. In the cases of intra-household aggression, though, it can even be this cat triggers the predatory behavior and this cat doesn't, particularly if the trigger is not just cat, but is a specific movement or behavior or response from the cat. As in, the cat runs, I chase the cat. And if you have a cat who doesn't run, you may not see that same predatory response. But that would still be something that we would want to consider, especially if there is the potential for this cat to ever run. But I digress. Predatory behavior as the function is probably one of the most challenging in terms of outcome, because predatory behavior isn't about changing emotion. Some people will frame it up as like teaching impulse control, but it's not really that either. The truth of the matter is that we have bred dogs intentionally, created generations of genetic reinforcement for them to act out the entirety of their predatory sequence, or we've even amplified parts of the predatory sequence. And when addressing prey drive, if we're finding portions of that problematic to live with, the best guidance is to collaborate with it, not to try to suppress it or compete with it, because you're just not going to win. And so there are a lot of things that we can do to work with predatory behavior. I really enjoy predation substitution training from Simone Mueller. But there's a difference between being able to take an enjoyable walk with your dog in spaces where wildlife exists and safely having your dog live in a home with another animal they consider prey. There we're talking about risk assessment. What happens if there is a management oops? There will almost always be a management oops, especially when we're talking about for the lifetime of the pet. If a management oops is going to result in one of the pets losing their life, that is a pretty high risk. And so these are often situations where what we're really talking about is not a situation where the dog and the cat end up integrated and living together. It's really a situation of long-term management, increasing safety. We may absolutely be working on collaborating through prey drive overall, but not to the end that the animals end up together. Collaborating on prey drive does not mean that at the end of the day the dog cuddles up with the prey. I had someone reach out to me recently, and they were trying to determine if their dog could live with a cat. And we were able to determine that their dog's reaction to cats was predatory, and my recommendation was to not even try that. Is there a possibility that the right dog with the right cat in the right setup could possibly be successful? maybe. I'm certainly not saying it's always impossible 100% of the time, mostly because I don't talk in absolutes. But I think it would be very high risk and incredibly stressful, and likely unfair. The other type of situation I see is fear. And these are often situations where, if they're coming to me, the dog is afraid of the cat and behaving aggressively because of that. They may be afraid of the noises that the cat makes. They may be afraid of their body language or behavior. They may have had negative interactions with them or with cats previously. And in those cases, there's still, of course, all of the variables we need to look at. We need to look at the frequency of the interactions, the intensity of the interactions, the bite levels. We need to look at the number of variables. All of the same variables that we look at in an intra-household case apply in terms of prognosis. But if all things are equal, except we're looking at predation versus fear-based behavior is going to be easier to work with in this context because with fear, we can work on changing the emotion. And in dog-dog aggression, typically fear is our harder one because it's coming up against things like overexcitement or frustration or very contextual aggression. And a dog who is aggressing against other dogs in the home, their prey drive out and about might be the easier thing to address and collaborate with. But the game really changes when you change the context of what you're talking about. When you're talking about the prey animal living in the house with the dog versus an animal that the dog fears living in a house with the dog, we can be more successful in helping the dog to be less afraid or to not be afraid of the cat. Sometimes in these situations, we might also draw in the work of a cat behavior consultant, depending on the role that the cat is playing in their relationship, that their behavior is playing in their relationship. My job is to certainly know enough to ensure that the cats are safe, that their basic needs are being met, that their enrichment needs are being met, to be able to read basic body language. But if the cat is experiencing chronic stress, or if there are behaviors specifically that we might be trying to modify, I will often bring in a cat behavior consultant. Another area where we might see intra-household conflicts between dogs and cats is overexcitement that's turning into frustration, or is kind of taking that path through overexcitement, too high of arousal, frustration into that fight mode, or we might see frustration, just straight up frustration, going up into that fight mode. We're seeing aggression, and those cases again can be a bit easier. Again, all things equal, there are a lot of variables that we consider in each kind of case, but all things equal, if we're already dealing with positive emotions, or there's frustration, but the frustration is about access, it's about expectation, then a lot of times we can be more successful in lowering those arousal levels and in meeting needs. So addressing the function of that behavior even more easily, and all other things equal, may have an even better chance of getting to a successful resolution or a full integration. And then the other way that I see this play out is in very, very contextual situations, which is not to say that these very contextual situations might not involve excitement, frustration, fear, potentially predatory behavior, although less so. I can't think of an example of that right now. But when I'm talking about fear, I'm talking about like the dog is afraid of the cat. When I'm talking about overexcitement or I'm talking about the cat exists or the cat moves and the dog shoots up the stress scale and is no longer in their thinking brain, and is behaving in a way that's scary to the cat and is not able to be gentle with their body and may even go so high up the stress scale that they're engaging in aggressive behavior, even though originally we may have started out with positive emotions. But sometimes the relationship is good and we're having very specific contextual issues, like the dog is resource guarding some specific items or spaces or something like that from the cat. And those can again, all other variables equal, can sometimes be the easiest of all, because we in those cases often have a neutral or positive relationship that we're building on, and there's just a specific context where we're building skills or changing emotion. So that is a bit of an oversimplification of things. I think I said a number of times, all other things equal, there are a lot of variables to consider, but I don't talk a lot about dog-cat aggression, and I do work many cases that are based in dog-cat aggression. So let me know what questions you have.